Of all the stages she'd walked across, this was the rare one that felt like it would never be hers. The neon-soaked set of Gutfeld's studio pulsed in icy blues and stark whites, while the house band ended a brisk, cheeky opener. The crowd responded on cue, palms slapping together with that familiar late-night rhythm, cheery, automatic, almost rehearsed. Greg Gutfeld lounged in his chair, spectacles pushed down his nose, a knowing smirk already set. "Folks," he drawled in his trademark half-mocking voice, "tonight's guest has worn more titles than most people have outfits: actress, duchess, headline magnate, documentary centerpiece, and, if you believe the press, the single most misread person on the planet." A wave of amusement rolled through the studio. "Give it up for Meghan Markle." The clapping grew louder as Meghan strode into view. She was dressed in a sleeveless, cream-colored high-neck top that fit like it had been tailored that morning, paired with a soft caramel suede skirt and knee-high leather boots. Her hair was sleeked back into a low, immaculate bun that left her features completely uncovered. Her spine was straight, her chin just slightly raised, giving off a quiet, deliberate poise. She lifted one composed hand in a brief wave, then crossed the stage toward Greg with the ease of someone long used to cameras tracking her every move. Greg rose to meet her. "Meghan," he said, hand outstretched, "welcome to the circus." She clasped his hand for a second. "I've been through worse," she answered evenly. The audience chuckled, though there was the slightest bite beneath her tone. They took their seats, the applause ebbed, the room settled into a watchful calm. Greg straightened a sheet of notes in front of him. "So," he began casually, "what's it like being the most picked-apart woman online? Someone who, according to you, never went chasing the spotlight, but somehow always ends up right in the middle of it." The crowd laughed. Meghan offered a courteous smile, though a small muscle along her jaw flickered. "I think that says more about the internet than it says about me," she answered. Greg dipped his head, very diplomatic. "I do my best to live above the static," she replied evenly, "not drown in it." One of his eyebrows arched. Bold statement to make under studio lights. Another round of chuckles. Meghan's smile flattened a bit. She crossed her legs with care. "Being seen isn't the same as being fixated on," she said. "Fair," Greg replied, "but fixation does need someone to focus on." Meghan exhaled softly, almost a laugh. "You're awfully sure of your read on me." "Occupational hazard," he shot back. "My contract literally pays me to assume things." The audience chuckled again. Meghan dipped her head once, a small nod that felt more like endurance than agreement. Greg leaned in a bit. "All right, let's keep it breezy for a second. You've spent serious time in the UK, in Canada, here in the States. If you had to name one place that truly feels like home, what would you say?" She answered without pause. "Home is wherever I'm treated with dignity." Greg cocked his head. "So we're not talking maps and borders." "We're talking people," she replied. Greg's grin widened. "Those are my favorite answers. They usually come with a fine print disclaimer later." The audience laughed more loudly. Meghan's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "You're having fun with this," she commented lightly. "I'm enjoying being curious," Greg said. "That's how we justify the electricity bill." Meghan flicked a glance at the crowd and back to him. "Curiosity can cross lines," she replied. "So can celebrity," Greg counted, "and yet we both showed up." That one hit closer than she appeared to like. A rustle of reaction moved through the room. Greg slid one card aside and picked up another. "You've talked a lot about taking back your voice after stepping away from royal duties. Do you actually feel unburdened now?" Meghan's practiced smile reappeared, smooth as glass. "I feel in alignment with what's true for me," she said. Greg gave a slow nod. "That sounds extremely on message." A handful of people laughed louder than the rest. Meghan's gaze sharpened. "What exactly is that supposed to mean?" Greg lifted a shoulder. Not an insult, just reality. Anyone in the public eye eventually turns into a label. Some fight that, some lean into it, some build empires on it. Meghan reclined a fraction in her chair. You say that like it's something to be ashamed of. I say it like it's factual. Her mouth tightened for a heartbeat. I don't treat my existence as a product, she said. I treat it as a calling. Greg's smile flickered. In this town, those two can look almost identical. A soft swell of clapping broke out. Meghan let a quiet breath slip out through her nose. You seem determined to turn everything into a punchline, she said. And you seem determined to turn every sentence into a manifesto. The crowd responded with a nervous blend of giggles and low murmurs. Meghan sat a little taller. The search for meaning is what makes us more than mere performers, she said, her words edged. Greg stayed relaxed. Funny thing is, it's the performers people actually invite into their living rooms every night. That line landed hard, sparking louder laughs. Meghan stayed stone-faced, watching him. Do you think this is sport? He asked. I think this is a talk show, Greg said. Sports need both sides to want to play. Meghan's tone cooled further. I didn't agree to be turned into a joke. And I didn't book you to be turned into a saint, Greg replied evenly. For the first time, the laughter didn't come right away. A short, uneasy hush swept through the audience. Greg reclined again, posture loose, smile intact, though his gaze had turned sharper. Okay, he said with forced lightness, let's shift to something you voluntarily put out there, your narrative, the sit-down specials, the streaming series, the keynote talks. Do you ever worry that telling the story over and over starts to turn genuine hurt into a kind of performance piece? Meghan's jawline tightened. Pain doesn't become fake just because it's spoken aloud, he replied. Agreed, but saying the same story repeatedly does change how people receive it. She angled her head slightly. You make it sound like you're accusing me of embellishing. I'm saying a lot of viewers are exhausted. A ripple of low voices moved through the studio. Meghan's eyes flashed. Only people who weren't wounded get to be tired of hearing about it, she shot back. Greg nodded slowly, and only people convinced their account is definitive get to feel absolutely sure. For a moment, no one said anything. The stage lights buzzed faintly. A camera shifted to a tighter shot. Meghan finally cut the silence. You said this would be a conversation, she said coolly, not an interrogation dressed up as one. Greg's grin stayed, but there was less warmth in it. And you walked in assuming you'd steer the whole thing, he replied. Looks like we're both recalibrating. The audience collectively leaned forward. The breezy banter from the opening was gone, replaced by a taut, focused silence. Greg drummed his fingers once on the desk. Okay, he said with forced lightness. Relax, we're still in the nice portion. Meghan held his stare, her face unreadable. So am I, she said. No laughter followed. People in the room could sense it now. The cordial expressions were already turning into armor, and the actual clash hadn't even hit its peak. The red applause sign blinked on, and the crowd clapped automatically, but the sound was thinner, hesitant, as if they weren't quite sure what they were encouraging anymore. Greg fanned the stack of cards in front of him with theatrical ease. Up to this point, he said with forced cheer, we've learned that you are profoundly deep, chronically misread, and exhausted by being the topic of conversation. That's the recipe for a 21st century legend. A few small bursts of laughter scattered around the studio. Meghan's expression didn't move. I never claimed to be misunderstood, she said crisply. I said some people actively refuse to understand. Greg bobbed his head. Ah, willful misreading, much more ominous. Much more accurate, she replied. Greg gave an approving nod. Let's zoom out to the version of your life most people actually see. Documentaries, high-profile interviews, speeches. Do you ever feel like you're stuck inside a loop of your own story? No, she responded immediately. Greg blinked. Not even a beat of reflection. Because it's a lazy framing. It suggests I'm unaware of how I come across. Greg tilted his head. It suggests you cover the same ground frequently. The audience burst into sharper laughter. Meghan's eyes cooled. People repeat themselves when they're constantly ignored, she said. Greg settled back in his chair. Or repeating it keeps paying off, he countered. A collective ooh rippled through the crowd. Meghan adjusted her position, the fabric of her skirt whispering against the chair. You're putting a lot of effort into painting me as calculated, she said. It's obvious. I'm putting a lot of effort into figuring out the strategy. There's a difference. My existence is not a rollout plan, she shot back. One finger lifted. If that's true, then half of... Same steady tone. You walked away from the monarchy, you've said, to escape being controlled, Greg went on. But your current existence revolves around shaping the storyline. Does that ever feel like a trap of your own making? Meghan gave a short, sharp laugh. You treat inconsistency as failure. I see it as growth. Greg's brows climbed. Growth usually leads somewhere new. What I'm hearing is mostly the same plot with upgraded production value. That crack triggered the biggest reaction of the night so far. Big laughs, claps, a few audible gasps. Color rose faintly in Meghan's cheeks. It's very easy to sit behind a desk and lecture, she said. Let's see how zen you are when your whole identity gets turned into a global punching bag. Greg's smile thinned a little. It already is, he said. I just don't label it as persecution. Meghan's stare bored into him. You clearly take pleasure in downplaying what I've lived through. I take pleasure in testing what you assert, Greg replied. She leaned in, her voice suddenly sharper. And I'm telling you, you're in over your head. The room dropped into silence again. Greg didn't look away. Depth isn't about how loudly someone reacts, he said quietly. It's about how much questioning they can actually handle. Meghan straightened. Then you should try having the entire planet dissect you just for existing. Greg nodded once. You're right. I only anchor a show that millions watch every night, basically invisible. The laughter roared again, louder than before. Meghan stayed stone cold. Her tone had turned to steel. You really think this is witty? I think it's straightforward, Greg answered. She shook her head slightly. You're belittling something that rewired my life, and you're elevating something that jump-started your media empire, Greg shot back. The crowd's reaction was immediate and mixed, sharp, loud, and split down the middle. Whatever this was, it wasn't playful sparring anymore. Meghan let out a hard breath. I did not agree to come here and be taken apart piece by piece, she said. Greg's voice stayed light, but carried an edge. You agreed to come here and be visible, he replied. Being examined comes with that territory. She looked at him now with open annoyance. Every single question you ask is loaded. Only because you keep handing me the bullets, Greg shot back. The audience responded again, a mix of laughter and discomfort. Meghan's composure was clearly fraying. Her back was rigid, her voice losing its earlier polish. At the fringes of the set, the faint silhouette of a producer appeared and disappeared. The atmosphere had shifted into something undeniably combustible. Greg kept his gaze on her. We've barely brushed the truly personal stuff, he said with a forced chuckle. Meghan's eyes flared. Then tread carefully, she warned. Greg's smile returned, smaller but still visible. I usually do, he said, especially when the ground feels this fragile. The entire studio seemed to lean toward the stage. Everyone could sense it now. Whatever philosophical disagreement they'd started with had slid into something raw and personal, and there was no easy path back to safety. The room's quiet deepened, not the excited silence of an audience waiting for a joke, but the strained kind that settles when everyone realizes they're witnessing something slipping out of control. Even the band had gone still, hands off their instruments, eyes fixed on the exchange. Greg nudged his glasses up his nose and glanced down at another card. Okay, he said, as if nothing had shifted. Let's talk about your life here in the States. Meghan crossed her arms tightly. That's exactly what we've been talking about, she replied. Greg's mouth twitched a little. I meant the version you don't usually package as reinvention, the ordinary stuff. She let out a short, dismissive chuckle. You seem convinced I float around in some Hollywood snow globe. I think a lot of people watching imagine you do, Greg said. It's kind of built into the postal code. A few scattered laughs trickled through the crowd. Meghan stayed silent. You've said that moving here allowed you to finally feel free, Greg went on. But freedom for most people looks a lot like being left alone. You seem to have found the opposite. Meghan's smile resurfaced, thin and practiced. Freedom is about what's happening inside you, not the stamp in your passport. Greg nodded once. That line could go straight on a promo poster. The response from the crowd was mixed this time. Some laughs, a few audible sighs. Meghan's gaze sharpened. You keep using that tone like it's a put-down. I'm just pointing out a pattern, Greg replied. She leaned in a fraction. That's what happens when your reality is turned into a spectator sport. Or reality is used as the sport, Greg counted. A low murmur circled the audience. Meghan's tolerance was clearly edging toward the limit. Greg steered the conversation in a new direction. He said, let's bring your marriage into this. You and Harry are one of the most talked about couples on Earth. Do you ever get the sense that the public version of your relationship is drowning out the private one? Meghan released a sharp breath. There it is again, suggesting it's all an act. I'm suggesting it's under tremendous strain, Greg replied. Being watched that closely reshapes any relationship. Some outlast it, some start to need the spotlight to function. Meghan gave a short scoff. You talk like you have a window into our home. I don't, Greg said, but I know what exposure does. It bends everything around it. She sat up straighter. My marriage is not a convenient example for your theories. Greg lifted his shoulders. Then maybe stop turning it into one for the cameras. A quiet collective ooh floated through the audience, along with a few tentative claps. Meghan's eyes flashed. We walked away from an entire system to keep our family safe, she said, her words clipped. That isn't neediness, that's principle. And yet, Greg replied in the same even tone, your family ended up being the centerpiece of nearly everything that came after. Meghan's voice tightened. Because we were forced to explain ourselves. For how long? Greg asked. When does defending yourself stop being a necessity and start becoming who you are? That question landed harder than the befores. Meghan paused for the smallest moment, then steadied. The truth doesn't come with a time limit, she said. Greg nodded once. Audiences do. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some clapped enthusiastically, others let out light boos. Meghan's composure gave way to open annoyance. You boil everything down to numbers and audience graphs, as if people can be charted. Greg's smile barely shifted. On a TV show, they pretty much are. She shook her head slowly, almost with pity. That's such a narrow way to move through life. And it's the arena you keep stepping back into, answered Greg. The crowd leaned in once more. Greg glanced at the next bullet point in front of him. Let's touch on your role as a campaigner, he said. You talk a lot about reform, inequality, empowerment. Do you ever worry that at this point you're more recognizable than the issues you champion? Meghan let out a sharp, icy laugh. You're very skilled at disguising resentment as curiosity. Greg didn't flinch. I'm skilled at asking why the spotlight keeps hugging you instead of your initiatives. Her eyes thinned to slits. You really believe I'm in this for the spotlight, she said. I believe visibility is the main currency of the arena you operate in, he answered, still composed. She leaned closer, her tone turning blade sharp. You talk as though I built this environment. I didn't. I responded to it. Responses can double as strategy, Greg countered. The audience reaction grew louder, applause tangled with soft gasps. Meghan's jaw was clenched now, her posture stiff as stone. She changed her angle of attack. You've spent this whole time orbiting my life. Do you ever stop to interrogate your own bias?
Greg's smile returned. That's literally my job description. I do it by bringing people on who don't agree with me. She tilted her head, unimpressed. You confuse stirring the pot with being brave, and you confuse being offended with being profound. A sharp exclamation popped from somewhere in the front row. Meghan's tone dropped into something glacial. You think this is about peeling back my layers? She said. All you're really exposing is how threatened you are by women who won't make themselves smaller. The response was immediate and polarized. Some in the audience cheered, others groaned their disagreement. The split was obvious now. Greg's voice stayed even. He calls out choices, he said, not chromosomes. Nobody is shielded from questions because of what they symbolize. She glared at him. Every time a man aggressively interrogates a woman, he says exactly that. And every high-profile figure who hates being examined claims they're being targeted for who they are, not what they do. The air tightened again, tension thickening across the room. Greg eased back, folding his forearms loosely in front of him. We've covered a lot, he said with forced lightness. Your personal story, your relationship, your advocacy, your version of American life. Meghan's stare was now openly hostile. Then let me put this plainly, she said. I am not here to be turned into a psychological exhibit for your viewers. And I'm not here to turn this set into a safe room where no one can be questioned, he answered, his tone still calm. The reaction was immediate and intense, cheers, groans, and shouts mingling through the studio. Meghan blew out a sharp breath. You're taking this too far, she said. Greg's smile was back, narrow and controlled. We haven't even reached the line, he replied. For the first time